Good morning and welcome to the Hoosier Tailgate. Pregame primer for today's game against Indiana and UCLA. It is a nice and cloudy fall weather day down in Bloomington as Big Noon Saturday is there on site for today's game. Welcome. I'm the coach, Shannon Griffith, and today I want to set this stage a little bit for the big matchup in Bloomington as the UCLA Bruins are coming into Memorial Stadium to take on your Indiana Hoosiers. We'll talk through the key storylines, the matchups to watch, and I'll give you my prediction here before kickoff today at noon. Currently, Indiana is a 26.5-point favorite. That has moved up to since Thursday's tailgate show, which you don't usually see too much of. You usually see it go down, but it has gone up by 2, and that's kind of an interesting dynamic, and I'll give you a reason why I think that happens. And if you're joining us here this morning, by all means, feel free to participate. Questions, comments, we'll try to get you up on the screen to let you know what's going on here this morning, and more than happy to get you all straight and ready to go this morning. And Mike, I appreciate you jumping on and joining us as well today. Right now, Indiana, like I said, 26.5-point favorite, over or under 53.5. And, kind of how have we gotten to this point in the season with Indiana right now? They are 7-0, number 2 in the country. And I think for now, the national media has started to buy in that this Indiana Hoosier team is for real. And I think that's the one thing that has come out of this last 7 weeks. And their story, 2 big wins, first over Illinois, which was number 9 at the time. And now with the number 2 Oregon game that they beat out in Oregon, that one too, those 2 are the signature wins on the resume for the Hoosiers. On Thursday, we kind of went through the FPI and looked at the resumes in the Big Ten. While the standard FPI, Indiana is 3 behind Oregon and Ohio State. When you look at the resume and you dig a little deeper, Indiana is the best resume in the Big Ten because of those 2 wins over Illinois, 63-10. And then that 30-20 win out at Oregon. And when you look at Ohio State, they have yet, other than the fact that they beat Texas week 1, which everybody thought Texas was going to be a national title contender, they're not looking as good as they once were looking in the preseason when everybody was saying that they were a potential national championship contender with Arch Manning taking over. But that's the only team that really Ohio State's beaten. And I'm not trying to take away from Ohio State because they are really, really good. And you never want to downplay a team. But when you're looking at resumes and you're looking at seeding and you're looking at things that value, you have to take into the equation who one has beaten or who has one lost to. So that's going to be a key thing looking forward here. And Oregon's signature win was the win in Happy Valley against Penn State, where they took one in double overtime. And after that, Penn State fell off the end of the earth. So it's going to be a interesting aspect of things when you start looking at that. Hey, Jason, appreciate you coming in. And hey, I thank you for joining me from that tailgate. Hopefully that you guys are enjoying the surroundings there in Bloomington today. My partner Jim Coyle and I will have everything after the game today, I should say, post-game show right after the conclusion of all the pressers, probably about 30 minutes after, but we'll get into that a little bit more here in a bit. But anyway, Indiana right now has a great resume as it pertains to the FPI. And remember, that's a shot in time. that changes. It will evolve on all those type of things. But when you look at Indiana and Coach Cignetti, they're playing with toughness, discipline, or that fast, physical, relentless style that Coach Cignetti talks about quite frequently as a hallmark of his ball club. A lot of confidence, and every week has got that feeling that this week is bigger than the last week as you're kind of building up as we head towards the end of the season. UCLA Bruins, right now they're coming in Indiana, probably one of the hottest teams in the country, 3 wins in a row. Coach Skipper took over for Deshaun Foster prior to the Northwestern game on the road at Northwestern, which they lost 17-14. That was Coach Skipper's first game as the interim coach. That way, after that Northwestern game is when they made the changes at the 2 coordinator spots. Coach Neuheisel, who was on the staff, was elevated to OC, and they brought in a coordinator, basically was the analyst at Syracuse and is now the coordinator there at UCLA. And since that change, they have won 3 in a row. What did they do? They simplified. They went back to some of their basic concepts and ideas, and even a coordinator coming in from the outside was trying to figure out, what does this team do? And he found a concept, relied on the base, and then added to it on a daily and a weekly basis to get their defense playing fast. And they've done so in these 3 wins. But when you want to take a deeper dive into it, with this UCLA team, let's look at this record from the perspective of what has transpired here over the last couple weeks of the season. When you take a look at this, the wins against Penn State, Michigan State, and Maryland, those are the 3 conference wins that they have. They're 3-1 in the Big Ten. Their only loss was to Northwestern on the road, 17-14, and Northwestern's a pretty good ball club. But those 3 opponents, Penn State, Michigan State, and Maryland, have a combined record overall of 10-11 on the year. Their combined record in the Big Ten is 1-11. So let me say that again. Penn State, Michigan State, and Maryland combined 1-loss record, 10-11, and a Big Ten conference record of 1-11. Now, the teams that have beaten UCLA, which includes Northwestern and New Mexico, their combined record is 16-5 overall. So the teams that they've played that have had a winning record this year, UCLA has lost in those ball games. When they've played teams that have a overall record that is not up to par, maybe you look at it as weaker teams, may look at it teams that are in a slump. They have beaten those teams, but the combined record is 10-11. But in the Big Ten, they're 1-11 because we are deep into conference play. So it does take into account what has UCLA done at this point in time. You always have to look at who they've beaten, who they've lost to. It's part of the matrix when you talk about a team's on paper black and white thing. But that may explain why this Vegas spread is up to 26.5 points and the over and under at 53.5. So that's going to be a key thing as overall. Jason, this game's going to be harder than people think. I haven't watched. Yeah, it's going to be. I mean, you got a premier quarterback at UCLA, Nico, who can not only sling it around real well, but you got a guy that's got a career record. His career record as a quarterback is a winning career record. I think his overall career record, it's like 16-4 his young career. He's almost thrown for 3,000 yards. And he's also completed about 65% of his passes. So he's a premier talent in the Big Ten. He struggled through the first half of the season. And of late, again, what Coach Neuheisel's done is he's simplified. And when you simplify things and you give a kid confidence, then you build from it. And when you come into the season and you're not confident in what you're doing, especially at the quarterback position, you're in trouble because that is the heartbeat of your offense. So understandable where Coach Neuheisel and that offensive staff's done. So you give them credit for where they're at and what they're doing. I just want to point out the facts of the matter are when they played premier talented teams, not only in non-conference, and I wouldn't overly call New Mexico a premier talented team, because they would be perceived to be a group of five school. That win-loss record 16-5 of those teams, which UCLA has lost to, and their wins have come against teams with losing records to date. So just pointing out the facts, not saying that is a significant reason one way or the other. It's why that point spread has jumped to 26.5 and overall. So you look at that from that standpoint, it's understandable what these things look like when you talk about Indiana and UCLA, but also you want to look at some of the things here with this statistical stuff right now. When you look at Indiana and UCLA's statistical record overall in the terms of what they're doing offensively and defensively, as you can see right now, Indiana is having a pretty darn good year offensively, led by Fernando Mendoza, who is right now the leader in for the Heisman, as pointed out today on ESPN's college football pregame show, and you can see why. Indiana 43 in almost 44 points a game, where UCLA right now is at 22 and a half points per game. So you got to look at that, and then total offense, it's almost, well, it is 133 yards differential, give or take, where Indiana's done well as third down conversions. UCLA has not been bad at 40%, but you can see if Indiana can remain in that 55 or above category today, it's going to be quite well, because that means they're on schedule. In Indiana, when they're on schedule, they're very tough to stop. It's when they get off schedule sometimes has it been a tougher climb for them in games when they're behind the chains. And when they are efficient on first down, and what do I mean by efficient? On first and second down, you want to have somewhere of an average of 4.0 yards per attempt on first or second down. So you're setting up the third and shorts and third and mediums at worst, because the percentage of getting first down is much higher in that regard. So when you say that, that's kind of what I look at there. Now, fourth down conversions is the big thing for me. UCLA has done quite well. It's 12 of 18, 67%. You're going to see a team that is really nothing to lose today, everything to gain. They're going to take opportunities to take chances. They've done it to this point all in these three games that they've won. They faked 2 punts. They've had success going forward on fourth down, and you're going to continue to see that from them, because, like I said, that is a team that's playing with confidence. And when you're playing with confidence, you may take some shots and chances that you may not customary do with a team. But because of UCLA's situation right now, they're going to take their shots. And you can see 67% is pretty darn good on fourth down. Conversely, Indiana's 3 of 11 at 27%. That's the category for Indiana. When you look at that statistically, they have not done well on fourth downs. And some of those are 3 yards or less in the equation. So that to me is a concern, because Indiana was better at that a year ago. And now they have struggled in that category on fourth downs. So what does that do? Well, in my opinion, maybe Sig is not going to push the envelope as much. We'll see in a game like this today. Or he may look at it as, if I have a yard to get, we're going to get a yard. And if we don't get it, I'm going to tip the hat to them. But right now, they just haven't done well there. Now, red zone, both teams have gotten points in the red zone, be it a touchdown or a field goal. UCLA at 96% and Indiana at 89%. Indiana has at least 14 more opportunities than what UCLA has had. Red zone touchdowns, you can see there, 61% for UCLA. So when they get in the red zone, it's predominantly been more 3-point variety than it has been a touchdown variety. On Indiana's side of the coin, they've done quite well, 73%, where they've gotten more touchdowns in that arena. So good thing there. Points off of turnovers. I always say this is a key dynamic. Indiana, again, 34 points off of turnovers, like they were about a year ago at this time. And then, of course, UCLA has only gotten 6 at this point in time. UCLA and Indiana time of possession. Indiana holds a slight edge, although UCLA over the last 3 wins that they've had, they've held it for, I think, about 38 minutes, something that Cignetti pointed out at his presser. Looking at these two defenses, both good defenses. UCLA coming on of late in these 3 wins, but Indiana only giving up 11.6 points a game to UCLA's 27.4. Indiana's rush defense has been phenomenal, while rush defense for UCLA, they have struggled in that arena. Only they're giving up 186 yards a game. Now, Indiana, who has averaged at over 200 some yards a game, I do think today is an important day for them to get themselves in a position to run the ball effectively. Remember, they had 4 straight games of 400 or 300 yards rushing or more. That got broken against, was it Oregon? I can't remember off the top of my head, but they were running the ball quite effectively. Iowa was the game that they got that broke the 300-yard streak. But today is the day that they need to get the run game going. And Roman Hemby and Kalon Black and Martin, all 3 of them, for what I'm concerned, is that they get the run game going today, because that's going to be a huge boost to their offense right now, especially with a team that's almost giving up 200 yards on the ground. Pass defense, Indiana's done quite well, 163.7 last week with Aiden Childs, who's a phenomenal quarterback, and kind of similar to Nico, because they both can throw it well and both have the ability to hurt you running the ball. Indiana gave up 293 yards a week ago. They had to address that this week in practice. UCLA's defense, 178 through the air, and Indiana, like I said, 163, but they had been in a great category there up until last week when they gave up 293. And then you can see total defense, Indiana 248 to UCLA's 365, let's call it. Third down conversions, Indiana done great. 25%. That is a unbelievable statistic for a defense. They have done quite well on third downs by getting the opponent off schedule. And that will be a key today. Get UCLA off schedule. UCLA's defense, 52%. Indiana, 58% on fourth down conversions. That's where they've struggled defensively, as they have not been able to get off the field on fourth down scenarios. And that today is a byline to keep an eye on. If UCLA is using 4 downs and they're having high success, that is a concern that you need to keep an eye on today, because Indiana's fourth down conversions of late, 7 of 12, it's not like they've had a ton, but of those 7 out of 12, that's 58%. Their success rate hasn't been great on that. UCLA is right at 47%, which isn't too bad. Red zone, about the same when you talk about it, but here's the key kicker there. Indiana has only faced 10 opportunities in the red zone, of which only 12 points has a team gotten through the 7 weeks of the season. And the red zone productivity for Indiana is only their success rate. When you flip the statistical numbers, you got an 80% chance that the team will not score points. So pretty good there by Indiana. Sacks, here's another key differential. Indiana, 26 sacks on the year. UCLA only has 6. UCLA's pass rush isn't all that great. When they want to try to get after the quarterback more times than not, they're going to have to bring pressure. They're not going to get home with 4. Indiana has shown that they can get home with 4. So in that respect, Indiana has done quite well in that category of things. And that's something to keep an eye on here as Indiana heads into this ball game today. But that could be a big factor in this game when you think about Indiana's successes when it comes to turnovers. Indiana's a +7 overall. UCLA's a -1. And remember, 34 or 36 points off of turnovers for Indiana is huge. So when Indiana's gotten the turnovers, they've done quite well converting those into points. But Indiana and UCLA, when you look at it all, it's a pretty interesting dynamic when you sit there and look at the black and white of it, from overall records through the success of offense and defense. What do you say about Mendoza? He's been steady, efficient, and smart with the football. He's made some big plays as well as running the ball. You got the best 3 wide receivers predominantly in the Big Ten with Surratt, Cooper, and Williams. Targeted calls to those 3 guys. How am I going to get the ball to Surratt? How am I going to get the ball to Cooper's hands and EJ's hands? And what mismatches am I looking for out on the outside where I can get those targeted throws to those guys? And the big question, can the secondary for UCLA hold up? I mean, of late, they've played well. Early on, they weren't playing as well, giving up a lot of big plays. And that's another byline to watch today. The big play category, anything over 15 yards, run or pass, is considered a big play. Indiana's done quite well the last few weeks. And Indiana's defense has done pretty decently against the big play. But you got a quarterback today with Nico who's very dynamic, and Indiana's going to have to make sure they keep that kid in the pocket and do not take their eyes off of him. Do they spy Nico today in certain situations? More than likely. But that kid, 6'6", 220 pounds, is a load when he runs, takes off and runs, and he's got that big stride. So he's fast. And so Indiana will have to be on guard with that. Remember against Old Dominion, what they did with that quarterback, first play of the game, they took it like 70 yards for a touchdown on a quarterback run read type of scenario. So against Nico today, you got to get pressure on him. And when you get pressure on him, you got to keep him in the pocket and making sure that you do not give him the escape routes where he can take off and run it for 15, 20, 30 yards. He killed Penn State doing that. I mean, literally killed Penn State. I bet he had close to 150 yards on that game rushing alone, and he is their leading rusher. So you look at that. And then when you look at this UCLA offense, IU, again, 293 a week ago, they're going to have to tighten that up and not allow UCLA to have the success that Aiden Childs did a week ago. That first starts with pressure. Indiana was not getting home like they had been against Michigan State. It was kind of a hit or miss situation. They've got to be better today, again, against Nico. And then also the pressure aspect of things, they've got to be calculated in what they do and when they do it. When you bring heat, do you bring more than they can block? Or do you kind of do your zone pressure packages in situations trying to disguise things and, take things off? Remember, Kellen Wyatt is lost for the season. I anticipate Stephen Daly to being a more important part of this Indiana defense. And then also up front, who's going to win the line of scrimmage? That's another key component in any game. Who dominates up front on both sides of the football? Indiana, for the most part, has won those battles in most of their games, and even including last week against Michigan State. Although they gave up a lot of passing yards, Indiana gave Michigan State hardly any rush yards and did quite well. Childs had the one big run of 60 yards, and that was about it. So that's going to be things with Indiana is going to have to continue to do in that situations today for the Hoosiers. When you look at this game in terms of the let's see here. When you look at this game from a objective per se, what is important in this ball game for Indiana and what they need to do? They got to win the turnover battle. That's kind of a given. Offensively, they have to be attacking and aggressive, but at the same time, create balance. They got to be able to run the ball with success today. They cannot get pushed in a situation where they're having to throw it over the running it, because I do think today is important to keep UCLA's offense on the sideline for the better part of the day. And you do that with balance. And then also finish red zone drives. When Indiana gets a chance to be in the red zone today, put points on the board, preferably 6 points. But you got a heck of a kicker, never turn down a chance to come away with points. And that's important in today's game. For UCLA, they're going to have to figure out how do they stop or contain Surratt, Williams, and Cooper. Those three guys have been big. And then how do they handle the two-headed monster that is Hemby and Black? You know, I do think Indiana needs to try and find ways to get the ball to Hemby's hands outside of just running it. He's a really good receiver in space. I like to see them add to what that potentially brings. When you look at it overall from UCLA standpoint, they've got to keep the game close so they can get into the fourth quarter, and it's a one score or less ball game. Penalties and turnovers as well for UCLA. Right now, the way I look at it, Indiana currently, like I said, is a 26.5-point favorite with a 53 over and under. I do think this is going to be a hard-fought ball game, but I do think Indiana will prevail in the end. 31-17 is kind of where I'm looking at the score being today. And this game is one of those games that Indiana takes another huge step forward in not only the Big Ten and potentially playing in the Big Ten championship, as well as the national spotlight as the number 2 ranked team. Look, Memorial Stadium is going to be rocking. That's going to be a huge beneficial thing for Indiana. And overall, I do think that that is going to be a big part of today's game when you look at it from that point of view. Quickly, let's see. Do I have UCLA's stats for the last 3 games? I do not. I do know that they have been rushing. I think they've averaged about 230 some yards a game, mission in that time period. As I stated earlier, though, when you look at it deeper, remember that was against teams that are combined 1-11 in the Big Ten and 10-11 overall. And although that was Penn State, Maryland, and Michigan State, we saw what Indiana did to a Michigan State team a week ago as well. And when you think about Penn State, it's just the wheels have fallen off that organization. That ball game was a 7-point ball game in the entire day, but Penn State's defense could not stop UCLA at all. And actually, Penn State's offense went up and down the field against UCLA. They just couldn't get the last point. It was kind of who had the ball last in that regard. Last week against Maryland, UCLA had to orchestrate a last-minute drive to get the field goal to win it 20-17. Now, they handedly beat Michigan State. I think it was 38-14 or something into that matter. But that was the game that they really, had control of the game. The other 2 games, it was a 4-quarter last play type of situation against 3 teams that are 1-11 and 10-11 overall. So I draw some comparisons and contrastions there, but I do think, they've been effective in the last 3 games with their overall statistical data when you look at it from that deal. But I like to paint the whole picture, not half the picture. But it's not to say that that's the 3 games that they've won isn't important as well. But I would add 4 because Skipper took over at Northwestern, a game they lost 17-14, and then changed coordinators, and that's when they've won 3 in a row. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this quick and short Hoosier Tailgate this morning to go over this ball game in our Coach Griff pregame primer. And let's see what all happens this afternoon there in Bloomington, as this Indiana team, number 2 ranked team in the country, takes on a hot UCLA team. It should be a heck of a game. I do think, like I said, Indiana will ultimately come out on top 31-17, but it's going to be a game that's going to be nip and tuck there to start with. But overall, I do think Indiana's depth and I do think Indiana's defense controls UCLA and comes away with a big win there in Beantown. Enjoy the game. If you're there, have a safe and fun time and a travel back home. We'll get you all caught up on Monday on Hoosier Tailgate at 7:30. But after the game today, join Jim Coyle and myself on the Indiana Sports Beat Radio post-game show 30 minutes after the pressers are completed. And we will have a quick snippet of today's game, what Indiana did well, what didn't they do well, and ultimately what led to the result that they were given against UCLA today, which I do believe will be a Indiana win. Thanks again for joining us. And let me saw a quick question here. Yeah, yep. And you said I asked Coach because Sig only looked at their 3. Yes. Sig did that in his pressure. I think he was trying to set the stage is that this is not the UCLA of the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. And he was trying to draw a little bit of a narrative there that this UCLA team overall record may look the way it does, but let's not forget, since the change, they're 3-1 with this new staff, which is perfectly right on. And I would have done the same thing had I been in his shoes to show that you cannot take any team in the Big Ten for granted at all. Any team can beat any team on any given Saturday in the Big Ten or in all college football. Today, I just wanted to point out why the spread was at 26.5. And I do believe it's because UCLA's record is they have lost to teams that have a combined record of 16-5. The games they've won are against teams that are 10-11 overall and 1-11 in the Big Ten since 1-11 in the Big Ten since conference play. Enjoy the game, guys. Have a safe travel home. If you're down in Bloomington, if you see Jim Coyle, tap him on the shoulder, say hello. And I will catch you right after the game on Indiana Sports Beat Radio post-game show with Jim Coyle, and always on Monday for the Hoosier Tailgate on thehoosier.com. Good afternoon, and we'll see what happens. Join us for the post-game show right after the game here this afternoon. Good afternoon. Have a great day.